My son-in-law went into my master bedroom claiming he just needed an aspirin. That single lie ended up costing him his marriage, his home, and his freedom. What happened next is a story about what happens when a predator realizes too late that he's actually the prey. Before I reveal what I found in the trash that exposed his entire plan, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And please subscribe if you believe that you should never mistake a father's kindness for weakness. The fork froze halfway to my mouth when Jamal's voice cut through the quiet hum of our dinner conversation. So Walter, tell me about that safe in the study. What kind of lock mechanism does it actually use? Maya nearly choked on her water glass, setting it down with a sharp clink against the coaster. Jamal, what kind of question is that? She asked, breathless and confused. But Jamal did not look at his wife. His eyes stayed fixed on mine, waiting with a predatory intensity that made my chest tighten. I set my fork down carefully, buying myself a few seconds of time, just curious about home security. He continued, that practiced salesman smile spreading across his face like oil on water. You know, with all the break-ins happening in the area lately, a man your age cannot be too careful. What break-ins? I asked, keeping my voice level and calm. I had lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. The most excitement we had seen was Mrs. Higgins losing her cat 3 times in 1 month. Jamal waved his hand dismissively, a gesture that felt both arrogant and condescending. Oh, you probably do not hear about them down at the senior center. They keep it quiet to avoid panic. He leaned forward, elbows resting on my mahogany dining table, violating the manners I had taught my daughter decades ago. But a man your age living alone in a house this size, you must have some serious assets tucked away. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Dad has always been careful about locking up Jamal, you know that. Right, but what about insurance? Jamal pushed, his voice growing more insistent, more aggressive. I mean, if something happened to you, God forbid, Maya would need to know where everything important is kept, would she not? The room felt smaller suddenly. The air grew heavy. I watched Jamal's face, noting how his pupils dilated slightly when he mentioned my hypothetical demise. I noticed how his fingers drummed a nervous rhythm against the wood when I did not immediately respond. I have everything organized, I said finally, my voice deliberately slow. Maya knows what she needs to know. But does she know about the key? The question hung in the air like toxic smoke. Maya looked between us, confusion creasing her smooth brow. What key? She asked softly. Jamal's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. The one in your dad's bedroom drawer, the one tucked in the back. How do you know about any key in my bedroom? The words came out sharper than I intended, shedding a fraction of my frailty. For just a moment, Jamal's mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash across his features before the concerned son-in-law expression returned. I was looking for aspirin last week when my head was killing me, he said smoothly. Maya told me to check your bathroom cabinet, but I accidentally opened the wrong drawer first. Sorry, Walter, I did not mean to invade your privacy. Maya nodded quickly, desperate to diffuse the tension. I remember that headache, Jamal. You were really suffering. But I remembered that day too. Jamal had been upstairs for nearly 40 minutes, claiming stomach troubles after dinner, long enough to do more than search randomly for aspirin. The aspirin is in the medicine cabinet, I said quietly. Always has been for 30 years. Jamal's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Must have been really out of it from the pain, he muttered, looking down at his plate. The conversation limped along after that, but Jamal kept circling back. Questions about my bank, about who else had keys to the house, about my daily routines. Each query felt like fingers probing a wound, testing for weakness. When dinner finally ended, Maya jumped up to clear the dishes. I will handle cleanup tonight, Dad, you cooked, she said, kissing my cheek. I do not mind, I said, already stacking plates. It was my routine, my way of processing the day. Tonight I especially needed the familiar rhythm of washing and drying to calm the storm brewing in my gut. Come on, honey, Jamal said to Maya, his hand already heavy on her shoulder. Let your dad handle his kitchen. We should get some rest. They disappeared upstairs and I heard the heavy thud of the guest room door closing, but as I scrubbed the dinner plates I kept replaying Jamal's questions. The way he had known about a key he should not have known existed. The casual mention of my death and Maya's inheritance. My hands moved automatically, wash, rinse, dry, while my mind cataloged every red flag I had ignored over the past 3 weeks. Jamal's business trips that never quite added up. His constant interest in my financial situation. The way he studied my house like he was memorizing blueprints rather than living in a home. I finished the last glass and hung the dish towel on its hook. The kitchen gleamed under the overhead lights, restored to perfect order, but something fundamental had shifted tonight. The house felt different now. Not safer, but exposed. Upstairs, I could hear muffled voices through the walls, then silence. Time to see what other surprises waited for me in my own home. I wiped my hands and walked toward the hallway. The first thing I noticed climbing the stairs was the study door. It stood slightly ajar, maybe 2 inches of darkness visible through the gap. I stopped on the top step, my hand gripping the banister until my knuckles turned white. That door had been closed and locked when I went down for dinner. I always locked it, a habit from my years as a forensic accountant handling sensitive files. But Maya and Jamal were staying in the guest room down the hall. There was no reason for anyone to be near my study. I stood there for 30 seconds listening. No sound came from the guest room, no movement anywhere upstairs, just the familiar settling noises of an old house and my own heartbeat drumming in my ears. I pushed the door open slowly, waiting for it to creak. It did not. The hinges were well oiled, silent, but stepping into my private workspace felt like walking into a crime scene. Everything looked normal at first glance in my study. The books were aligned on the shelves just as I had left them, and the papers on my desk sat in their neat little stacks. But my eyes, trained by decades of methodical forensic work, caught the discrepancies immediately. The air smelled different in here, a faint trace of expensive cologne that did not belong to me. It was the same scent Jamal wore, a heavy musk that lingered long after he left a room. I moved to the floor safe, tucked behind my oak desk. It was a sturdy model from the 90s, heavy steel with a manual dial combination. To the untrained eye it looked untouched, but when I knelt down, my knees popping in the quiet room, I saw it. A tiny fresh scratch near the dial ring. Someone had tried to turn it. Someone had been testing the tension, trying to feel for the tumblers clicking into place. Jamal had not just been curious at dinner. He had been practicing. I stood up slowly, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. How had it come to this? I walked to the window, looking out at the dark silhouette of the oak tree in the backyard. My mind drifted back 3 weeks to the phone call that started this invasion. Maya had called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice strained and thin like wire pulled to the breaking point. "Dad, I know it is early, but we have a situation." She had paused, and I could hear her struggling not to cry. "Jamal's business is having some cash flow issues. Just a temporary liquidity problem with the new crypto exchange platform he is launching." I had gripped the receiver tight. "And how bad is this liquidity problem?" I had asked immediately, already reaching for my checkbook because a father never stops wanting to save his child. "We are behind on the mortgage, Dad. 3 months. The bank is talking about foreclosure proceedings if we do not catch up by the end of the quarter." The relief in her voice when I said they could stay with me had been heartbreaking. My little girl, 32 years old and too proud to ask for help until she had no choice. Of course she could come home. Of course I would help. But even then, something had nagged at me about Jamal's story. He claimed to be a visionary entrepreneur, always talking about blockchain and decentralized finance. But his explanations were heavy on buzzwords and light on mechanics. 3 days later, they had arrived with a U-Haul truck and too many boxes for a temporary stay. Maya had hugged me tight on the doorstep, tears in her eyes, whispering thank you over and over. But Jamal had been different. He walked in like he was doing me a favor, his handshake firm but brief, his eyes already scanning my house with an intensity that should have alarmed me then. "Nice place, Walter," he had said, walking through my living room like an appraiser. "Lot of vintage charm. Must be worth a fortune in this market." At the time, I had chalked it up to his abrasive personality. Now, standing in my violated study, I realized he had been calculating the square footage of his future assets. The evidence had been mounting for days, but I had chosen to ignore it for Maya's sake. Just yesterday morning, I had found the first concrete proof that my son-in-law was not a temporarily embarrassed businessman, but a liar drowning in his own vice. It was trash day. Usually Jamal slept until noon, leaving Maya to handle the chores before her shift. But yesterday, he had been up at dawn, aggressively helpful about taking the recycling out. "I will get that, Walter. You relax," he had insisted, grabbing the bin from my hands. His eagerness was suspicious. I waited until he went inside to shower, then I went back out to the curb. I opened the blue bin and dug past the milk cartons and newspapers. At the bottom, hidden inside an empty cereal box, I found them. 4 balls of crumpled paper. I smoothed them out against the side of the bin, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. They were not business invoices. They were not letters from investors. The first was a final notice from a credit card company I had never heard of, addressed to Jamal at a P.O. box. The second and third were dunning letters from online sports betting platforms, DraftKings and FanDuel. The numbers were staggering. He was not investing in crypto, he was gambling away his wife's security on parlays and point spreads. The fourth paper was the worst. It was a handwritten note scrawled on dirty notebook paper, barely legible. Thursday, pay up or we call the wife. I had shoved the papers into my pocket, my stomach turning over. He was in deep. He was desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. Later that same afternoon, Jamal had found me in the garden while I was pruning the roses. He approached me with that same fake smile he had worn at dinner tonight. "Hey, Walter, got a minute?" I kept clipping the dead heads off the roses, not looking at him. "What do you need, Jamal?" He sighed, a long, dramatic exhale meant to elicit sympathy. "Look, I have this incredible opportunity with the business. A shipment of mining rigs is stuck in customs and I just need a bridge loan to get them released. Once they are set up, we are talking 5 figures a month in passive income." I turned to look at him then. He was sweating despite the cool breeze. His eyes were darting around the yard, unable to hold my gaze. "How much?" I asked. 10,000, he said quickly. "Just for 2 weeks. I will pay you back with interest, Walter, I promise." I looked at this man who lied to my daughter, who invaded my home, who gambled away their future. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the crumpled betting slips in his face and tell him to get out. But I knew forensics. I knew that if you strike too early, the suspect runs and destroys the evidence. I needed to catch him in a way that Maya could not deny. I needed him to show his true face. I clipped another rose branch, the sound sharp in the quiet garden. "I cannot do it, Jamal," I said, putting on my best weary old man voice. "My assets are all tied up in fixed annuities and the pension. I barely have enough liquid cash to pay the property taxes this year. You know how it is on a fixed income." Jamal's face had twisted. For a split second, the mask of the deferential son-in-law vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. He looked at me with such contempt I thought he might strike me right there among the roses. Then he blinked and the mask slid back into place, though it was thinner now. "I understand, Walter," he said, his voice tight. "Tough times for everyone, right?" He had walked away stiffly, kicking at a stone on the path. That was the moment I knew I was not safe. That was the moment I knew he would stop asking and start taking. Standing in my study now, I checked the lock on the safe one last time. It was secure for the moment. I turned off the desk lamp, plunging the room into shadows. The conversation at dinner tonight about the key and the insurance was not just idle chatter. It was Plan B. I had denied him the loan, so now he was coming for the principal. I walked out of the study and locked the door behind me, testing the knob to be sure. I moved down the hallway toward the stairs, my footsteps silent on the runner. I needed to get to sleep, or at least pretend to. Tomorrow was going to be a long day, and if my instincts were right, tomorrow night would be the longest night of my life. As I passed the guest room door, I paused. I could hear Jamal's voice, low and urgent. He was not sleeping, he was planning, and I needed to be ready for whatever he had in store. Sleep did not come easily that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, cutting through the shadows, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. Every rustle of the wind outside sounded like an intrusion. The enemy was no longer at the gates. He was sleeping down the hall under my roof, eating my food and plotting my ruin. When sunlight finally bled through the curtains, I felt no relief, only a grim determination. The time for observation was over. Today the pressure would mount, and I knew from experience that pressure is what makes pipes burst and liars crumble. I went down to the kitchen at 6:30 sharp, moving with the stiffness I exaggerated for my audience. The coffee maker hissed and gurgled, the only normal sound in a house that felt charged with static electricity. Maya came down first, looking exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red. She kissed my cheek, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. "Morning, Dad," she murmured, reaching for a mug. I poured her coffee black just the way she liked it. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She sighed, leaning against the counter. "Jamal was tossing and turning all night. He is just stressed about the business launch." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of my own coffee. "Business can be unpredictable," I said. "Just make sure he is not taking on too much risk." Maya opened her mouth to defend him, but the doorbell rang, cutting her off. It was too early for visitors. 7 in the morning meant bad news or emergencies. I moved toward the hallway, but Maya waved me back. "I will get it," she said. I stayed in the kitchen, but I positioned myself near the doorway, my hearing aids turned up to maximum volume. I heard the heavy front door open, then a deep, unfamiliar voice. "Delivery for a Mr. Marcus?" "No, wait, Jamal. Jamal Evans." There was a pause. I am his wife, Maya said, her voice confused. Is there a problem? Yeah, lady, big problem, the man said. I am with Tri-State Recovery. We have a repo order for the Tesla parked in the driveway. Payments are 4 months behind. My chest tightened. 4 months. He had stopped paying the car note before he even lost the house. I heard Maya's sharp intake of breath. That is impossible, she stammered. My husband handles the finances. He said the lease was paid through the year. The man's voice remained flat and professional. Look, I just have the paperwork. Key or the hook. Your choice. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Jamal appeared, looking disheveled and frantic, pulling a t-shirt over his head. Hey, what is going on? He shouted, rushing to the door. I stepped into the hallway, then watching from the shadows. Jamal's face was a mask of panic when he saw the tow truck driver. There is a mistake, Jamal said, his voice cracking. I spoke to the bank yesterday. This was supposed to be resolved. The driver crossed his arms. Talk to the bank then, pal. I need the key. Jamal tried to physically block the doorway, a pathetic attempt at dominance. You are not taking my car. It is a misunderstanding. Do not make this a scene in front of the neighbors. The driver just dangled a hook from his belt. It is already a scene. Give me the fob or I call the cops and we add a disturbance charge to the bill. Maya turned to her husband, her face pale. Jamal, give him the key. Jamal looked at her, then at the driver, then at the sleek black car in the driveway that represented the last shred of his fake success. He was trapped. Humiliation washed over him, turning his skin splotchy and gray. He dug into his pocket and threw the key fob at the driver. Fine, take it, he spat. I will sue your company for wrongful seizure by noon. The driver just caught the key and walked away without a word. The silence in the hallway after the door closed was deafening. Maya stared at Jamal like she was seeing a stranger. 4 months, Jamal, she whispered. You told me the business accounts were frozen because of the audit, not because we were broke. Jamal ran a hand over his face, looking for a pivot, looking for a lie. It is the liquidity issue, Maya. I told you. The funds are there, but the transfer is stuck. Once the bridge loan clears, I will buy the car back in cash. Just calm down. Maya shook her head, backing away from him. I am going to work, she said, her voice trembling. I cannot deal with this right now. We are talking tonight, Jamal. Real talk. No more buzzwords. She grabbed her purse and left without saying goodbye to him. The front door slammed, shutting with a finality that made Jamal flinch. He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, his hands clenched into fists. He did not know I was watching. I saw the desperation settle onto him like a heavy coat. The car was gone. The house was gone. His wife was 1 foot out the door. He was cornered. And a cornered animal does not think, it just reacts. I cleared my throat and Jamal jumped, spinning around to face me. His eyes were wide, manic. I walked past him toward the kitchen as if I had seen nothing. Coffee is ready if you want some, I said mildly. Jamal followed me, his movements jerky and agitated. Did you hear that? He asked, his voice tight. Just the delivery, I said, pouring myself a second cup. Sounded like some confusion. Jamal let out a short, hysterical laugh. Yeah, confusion. Bank's right. Always screwing up the little guy. He was testing me, checking if his humiliation had registered. I gave him nothing. I just sipped my coffee and looked at the wall calendar. Well, I have a busy morning, I announced, washing my cup in the sink. Going to head down to the community center for a bit. Give you some space to handle your business calls. Jamal's eyes lit up. The relief was instantaneous and terrifying. You are going out, he asked. For how long? A few hours, I said, drying my hands. Maybe lunch. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. The house is all yours, Jamal. I walked out the back door toward the garage, but I did not leave. I knew exactly what would happen next. Jamal had interpreted my exit as a divine intervention. The old man was gone. The wife was at work. The house was empty. He had a 2-hour window to find the solution to all his problems. He had asked about the key at dinner. He had been probing about the safe. Now, with the repo man's tow truck still echoing in his ears, he had no other choice. I slipped into the detached garage and sat in my old Buick, but I did not start the engine. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to the internal security cameras I had installed 3 years ago. I had never told Maya about them. They were small, discreet lenses hidden in the smoke detectors. I watched the screen. Inside the kitchen, Jamal stood motionless for a full minute listening. Then he moved. He did not go to his office to make calls. He went straight to the drawer where I kept the spare house keys. He rifled through it, finding nothing. Then he paused, looking up at the ceiling toward the second floor. Toward my bedroom. I watched him on the small screen, a pixelated figure of greed and fear. He walked to the stairs, moving quietly now. He was ascending. He was going to cross the final line. I waited 5 minutes, giving him enough time to get comfortable, to get deep into his crime. Then I opened the car door and walked silently back toward the house. I would not catch him on camera. I would catch him in the flesh. I would give him the rope and let him tie the knot himself. I unlocked the back door soundlessly and stepped into the mudroom. The house was silent again, but this time I knew exactly where the noise would be coming from. I crept toward the stairs, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. It was time to go upstairs. The hallway carpet swallowed the sound of my footsteps as I ascended the stairs. I moved with a deliberate slowness, placing my weight on the outer edges of the treads where the wood was supported by the risers, avoiding the squeaks that would give me away. My heart was not racing. In my line of work, you learn to suppress the adrenaline until after the job is done. Right now, I was just a camera recording data. I reached the top landing and paused. The door to my master bedroom, which I always kept closed, was standing ajar. A slice of morning light cut across the hallway floor. From inside, I heard the distinct sound of wood sliding against wood. It was the heavy friction of my highboy dresser, the bottom drawer where I kept heavy wool sweaters, and underneath them a small metal box containing the spare keys to the house and the master key to the floor safe. I did not burst in. I stepped into the doorway and just stood there, letting my shadow fall across the room. Jamal was bent at the waist, practically inside the drawer. He was rifling through the layers of wool, his hands moving with frantic urgency. He was not looking for a sweater. He was digging for the metal box. I watched him for 5 full seconds, silently cataloging the violation. This was my sanctuary, the room where I had slept for 40 years, where my wife had spent her final days, and this man was tearing through it like a raccoon in a dumpster. "Jamal," I said, my voice low and flat. He did not just jump, he convulsed. He spun around so fast he nearly lost his balance, his elbow knocking over a framed photograph on top of the dresser. It hit the floor with a crack of shattering glass. Jamal's face was a study in terror. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickly, pasty color. His eyes were wide, the pupils pinned with fear. He looked at me, then down at the open drawer, then back at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. "Walter," he stammered, his voice an octave higher than normal. "I did not hear you come in. I thought you were at the community center." "Clearly," I said, stepping into the room and walking toward him. The broken glass crunched under my shoe. I looked down. It was a picture of Maya at her high school graduation. I looked back up at him. "What are you doing in my bedroom, Jamal? Why are you digging through my personal drawers?" He took a step back, holding his hands up in a surrender gesture. "I have a headache, Walter. A splitting migraine. I came up to look for some aspirin. I know Maya said you keep a stash in here somewhere." The lie was lazy and insulting. He was not even trying to be convincing anymore. He was just throwing words into the air, hoping something would stick. "Aspirin," I repeated slowly. "Yes," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. "My head is pounding from all the stress with the car and the business. I just needed relief." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "The aspirin is in the medicine cabinet in the master bathroom, Jamal. It has been there since you moved in. It is on the bottom shelf right next to the toothpaste. There is no aspirin in my sweater drawer." Jamal glanced nervously at the open drawer, realizing his mistake. "Right," he said quickly, his eyes darting around the room. "I checked the bathroom, but I could not find it. I got confused. I thought maybe you kept an emergency bottle in here. You know how memory gets when you are in pain. I just opened the wrong drawer by mistake." "By mistake," I said, stepping closer to him until I was inside his personal space. "You opened a heavy bottom drawer underneath 3 layers of folded wool, by mistake." Jamal swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I was just looking around, Walter. I am sorry. I did not mean to snoop. I will just go lay down." He tried to brush past me, but I held my ground for a second, forcing him to squeeze between me and the bed frame. I smelled the fear on him, a sour metallic scent mixed with his expensive cologne. He was trembling. He hurried out of the room, his footsteps heavy and uneven as he retreated down the hall toward the guest room. I heard his door close and the lock click into place. I stood alone in the center of my bedroom. The adrenaline finally hit me, a cold wash down my spine. I looked at the open drawer. To a normal person, it would look like a mess of sweaters, but I knew better. I knelt down and pulled a small penlight from my pocket. Before leaving the house this morning, I had placed a single clear hair plucked from my own head across the seal of the metal box hidden beneath the sweaters. It was an old trick, simple but effective. I lifted the layers of wool. The metal box was there, sitting in the back corner. I shone the light on the lid. The hair was gone. I opened the box. Inside lay the brass key to the floor safe. It looked undisturbed, sitting on its velvet bed. But I looked closer. I had dusted the key with a microscopic amount of UV powder 2 days ago, just in case. I did not need a black light to know what had happened. The key was slightly rotated. The bow of the key was facing left. I always placed it facing right. Jamal had found it. He had held it in his hand. He had probably taken a picture of the bidding code, or maybe he had just been testing to see if he could locate it quickly. He had not taken it yet because that would trigger an alarm before he was ready to strike. He was confirming the asset. He was making sure that when the time came, he could run in, grab the key, and open the safe in under 3 minutes. I closed the box and replaced the sweaters, smoothing them out to hide the disturbance. I stood up and walked to the broken picture frame. I picked it up carefully, brushing the glass shards into a pile. Maya smiled up at me from the photo, innocent and hopeful. She had no idea that the man she married was currently sitting 30 feet away, plotting to rob her father. I felt a surge of anger so potent my hand shook. This was not just about money. This was about safety. He had violated the one place in the world where I was supposed to be secure. He had come into my room while he thought I was gone and hunted for the means to destroy me. But he had made a fatal error. He assumed I was just a suspicious old man who had caught him by luck. He did not know that I had been baiting him. He did not know that the key in the box was real, but the lock on the safe had been changed 3 days ago. The key he had just found would fit the keyhole, but it would not turn the tumblers. And he did not know about the second trap I was preparing. I walked to the window and looked down into the backyard. Jamal had come out the back door. He was pacing by the fence line, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked manic, waving his free hand in the air. He was not resting. He was reporting in. He had found the key. He had confirmed the target. Now he was calling his masters to tell them the heist was a go. I needed to hear that call. I needed to know exactly what his timeline was. I put the broken picture on the nightstand and moved quickly to the closet, where I kept my old field gear. I dug past the winter coats until I found the long-range directional microphone I used for birdwatching now, but had used for much darker purposes in my past life. I checked the battery. It was full. I moved to the window, cracking it open just an inch. I aimed the microphone at the pacing figure in the yard and put the earpiece in. The sound of the wind magnified in my ear, then Jamal's voice cut through crystal clear and full of venom. The static in my earpiece hissed like a nest of snakes before clearing into sharp audio. Through the directional microphone, I could hear the dry leaves crunching under Jamal's expensive loafers as he paced the perimeter of the rose garden. He was 50 feet away, but in my ear, he sounded like he was standing right next to me, whispering his secrets directly into my brain. I watched him turn his back to the house, hunched over his phone in that universal posture of a man trying to hide from the world. "Look, Tone, I told you I have it handled," Jamal hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and bravado. "Stop calling the house line. If the wife picks up, we are both dead." I adjusted the gain on the microphone. The name Tone was new. Probably a nickname for a bookie or a loan shark, the kind of person who does not send letters on law firm stationery. Jamal kicked at the base of the old oak tree, sending a shower of bark flying. "I am not stalling," Jamal argued. "I was just inside. I found the key. Yeah, the physical key to the floor safe. I had it in my hand 5 minutes ago. The old man keeps it exactly where I thought he did. He is a creature of habit, Tone. A dinosaur. He does not change his spots." I felt a cold tightness in my chest. Hearing him call me a dinosaur was not the insult he intended it to be. Dinosaurs were apex predators for millions of years. It was the confirmation that he had successfully located the bait that chilled me. He believed he had outsmarted me. I listened as the voice on the other end of the line spoke. I could not hear the words, only the muffled cadence of a deep, aggressive baritone, but I could judge the content by the way Jamal shrank into himself. His shoulders hunched up toward his ears and he stopped pacing. "No, do not do that," Jamal pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Leave Maya out of this. She knows nothing. You touch her and I swear to God." The voice on the other end cut him off. Jamal flinched as if he had been slapped. "Thursday," Jamal said hurriedly. "Thursday night. She has the late shift at the hospital. The old man goes to sleep by 9. I will have the cash by midnight. Just give me 24 hours. Thursday. That was tomorrow. The timeline had just accelerated from a vague threat to an immediate deadline. I watched Jamal listen for another 10 seconds, his face pale and sweating despite the cool air. Yeah, I know the total, Jamal muttered. 47,000 plus the vigorish. I know. Just tell your boys to back off the house. I saw the car drive by this morning. You are scaring the neighbors. The call ended abruptly. Jamal lowered the phone, slowly staring at the black screen like it was a loaded gun. He stood there in my garden, surrounded by the flowers my late wife had planted, looking like a man who realized he was standing on a trap door. He ran a hand over his face, wiping away sweat, then straightened his spine. He put the mask back on. I saw him practice a smile, adjusting his expression in the reflection of the dark kitchen window before turning to walk back inside. I pulled the earpiece out and set the microphone down on my desk. My hands were steady, but my blood was running cold. $47,000. That was not a business loan or a liquidity issue. That was deep, chaotic gambling debt, and the man he owed it to was clearly not a bank. He had threatened Maya. They were watching the house. I looked down at my hands. They were wrinkled and spotted with age, but they had strength in them yet. I had spent 30 years investigating fraud, taking down white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. I had dismantled embezzlement schemes and exposed corporate theft, but this was different. This was personal. This predator had invited another predator to my doorstep, and now my daughter was in the line of fire. I packed the equipment away, returning the microphone to its case and sliding it behind the winter coats in the closet. I needed to move fast. Jamal had confirmed the timeline. Thursday night. Tomorrow night he would make his move. He believed I was a senile old man guarding a fortune he was entitled to. He believed the key in his hand was the answer to his prayers. He was wrong. I left the bedroom, closing the door gently. I walked down the hall past the guest room where Maya and Jamal slept. The door was open now and the room looked chaotic, clothes strewn everywhere, evidence of a mind in turmoil. I went downstairs and found Jamal in the kitchen. He was drinking a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly as he lifted it to his lips. When he saw me, he jumped, spilling water down his chin. "Walter," he said, wiping his mouth. "I did not know you were down here. Just getting a glass of water myself," I said, moving to the sink. "You look pale, Jamal. That headache still bothering you?" He forced a laugh, a brittle sound that cracked in the middle. "Yeah, just a lingering migraine. I think I am going to go lay down for a bit, try to sleep it off before Maya gets home." "You do that," I said, filling my glass. "Rest is important. You want to be fresh for tomorrow, right?" He froze. His eyes locked onto mine, searching for a double meaning, searching for a threat. "Why? What is tomorrow?" he asked, his voice tight. "Thursday," I said, taking a sip of water. "Trash day again. And I think Maya said she has that late shift. Just want to make sure you are feeling up to holding down the fort while we are both busy." The tension drained out of his shoulders, but only slightly. "Right," he said, breathing out. "Thursday. Yeah, I will be fine by then. Just need to sleep." He hurried out of the kitchen, escaping the conversation. I watched him go. He was a man walking toward a cliff, believing it was a staircase. I finished my water and set the glass down. The time for passive observation was over. Jamal had brought the threat of violence into my world, so I would respond with a violence of my own kind. Not physical, but psychological. I would not just stop him. I would dismantle him. I went to the garage and found my toolbox. I needed to go to the hardware store, but not for a new lock. I needed specific supplies. Glitter, high-visibility forensic dye, pressure springs. If Jamal wanted what was in my safe, I was going to give it to him. I was going to give him a prize he would never be able to wash off. A prize that would mark him for exactly what he was. I sat in my car for a moment, mapping out the next 24 hours. I had to play the part of the fool for one more day. I had to let him believe he was winning. I had to let him think the noose around his neck was loose enough to slip through. But tomorrow night, when he turned that key, he was going to find out that the noose had been tight all along. And I would be there to kick the chair out from under him. The hardware store run would have to wait until morning, because tonight I had one final task to complete before I could execute my plan. I needed undeniable proof. I had the betting slips from the trash, and I had the snippets of conversation from the garden, but neither of those carried the weight of a confession. I needed Jamal's own voice detailing his crime in high-definition audio so that when the time came, Maya would not be able to make excuses for him. I parked the car and went inside, playing the role of the tired retiree. I ate dinner in silence while Jamal fidgeted and checked his phone every 30 seconds. When I announced I was going to bed at 9 o'clock, the relief on his face was so naked it was almost insulting. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through the mechanics of the trap I would build tomorrow. Every small sound made me tense. The house settling the wind through the oak trees outside, the faint hum of the refrigerator 2 floors below. I was waiting. I knew Jamal well enough now to know he would not sleep. The pressure of that $47,000 debt was sitting on his chest like an anvil. He would need to talk to someone to reassure his partner, or perhaps just to talk himself down from the ledge. At 12:47 in the morning, according to the red numbers on my bedside clock, I heard it. Soft footsteps crossing the living room floor directly below my bedroom. They were not the light steps of my daughter getting a glass of water. They were heavy, pacing steps. Jamal. I remained perfectly still, controlling my breathing, listening as the sounds moved toward the center of the room. Then, barely audible through the old house's thin floors, I heard his voice. "Yeah, it is me. Everyone is asleep." A phone call. Jamal was making a phone call at midnight, speaking in whispers he thought no one could hear. I eased myself out of the warm covers, careful not to let the mattress springs creak. The hardwood floor was ice cold against my bare feet as I moved closer to the wall. In these old Victorian houses, the ductwork acts like a speaking tube. There was a large brass heating register in the corner of my room that connected directly to the main vent in the living room ceiling. I had discovered decades ago that if you sat right next to it, you could hear a conversation downstairs as if you were sitting on the sofa. I knelt on the floor, my knees protesting the hard surface, and leaned my ear toward the metal grate. Jamal's voice drifted up, tinny but clear, amplified by the metal ducts. "I am telling you, Tone, it is a lock. The old man is completely checked out. I tested him today with the key and he did not even notice. He is soft, Tone. A total dinosaur." My blood went cold. He was talking to the accomplice, the man from the garden conversation. I reached back to my nightstand and grabbed my smartphone. My hands were trembling, not from fear but from a cold, focused rage. I opened the voice memo app and pressed the red record button. I held the phone close to the vent, watching the sound wave visualize on the screen as Jamal continued to dig his own grave. "We are talking serious money here," Jamal said, his voice dropping lower but carrying an excited energy. "I found statements in his study a few weeks ago. He keeps at least 50 grand in cash in that floor safe, plus gold coins and some bonds. It covers the debt and leaves us with a nice cushion to get out of town." I watched the red timer on my phone screen tick upward. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. This was it. This was the conspiracy charge. This was the intent to commit a felony. What about the wife? The voice on the other end must have asked because Jamal paused. "Do not worry about Maya," Jamal said, and the casual dismissal in his tone made me want to go downstairs and strangle him. "She is working the night shift at the hospital tomorrow. She leaves at 6 and does not come back until 8 the next morning. It gives us a 12-hour window." I pressed my ear closer to the grate. I needed to hear the exit strategy. I needed to know what he planned to do with my daughter after he robbed her father. "I will dose the old man's drink around 8, Jamal continued. "I ground up some of his sleeping pills. He will be out cold by 9. I open the safe, we take the bag, and I stage it to look like a burglary gone wrong, or maybe we just leave it." "Leave it?" he asked someone on the other line. "Yeah," Jamal laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "That is the beauty of it. He is so senile half the time he probably won't even remember what was in there. I will tell Maya he must have moved the money and forgot. You know how old people get with their memory. I can convince her he is losing his mind. She trusts me. We will get power of attorney within a month and then we control everything." The rage built in my chest, hot and consuming. It was not just about the money. He was planning to gaslight my daughter. He was going to convince her that her father was demented, that I was losing my faculties just so he could seize control of my estate. He was going to use her love for me as a weapon against us both. He was going to turn me into a burden and himself into the savior, all while stealing every dime I had worked for. I stared at the phone screen, ensuring every word was being captured. The recording was now 2 minutes long. 2 minutes that would destroy Jamal's life forever. "Just be ready at midnight," Jamal said. "I will have the bag. We meet at the spot on 4th Street. I pay you your cut, you get the loan sharks off my back, and I go back to playing the loving husband. By Friday morning our problems are gone." The call ended. I heard Jamal let out a long sigh, the sound of a man who thinks he has just won the lottery. I heard his footsteps move toward the kitchen, probably to get a celebratory drink, then back toward the stairs. I quickly stopped the recording and saved the file, naming it simply Thursday Evidence. I slipped the phone under my pillow and scrambled back into bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin just as I heard Jamal's heavy tread on the landing. He paused outside my door, listening. I lay perfectly still, forcing my breathing into the slow, rhythmic pattern of deep sleep. After a moment, he moved on. The guest room door clicked shut. For a long time after that, I lay in the darkness, processing what I had learned. Jamal was not just a desperate debtor. He was a sociopath. He had no guilt about what he was planning. He saw me as livestock, a resource to be harvested. He saw Maya as a tool to be manipulated. He had crushed sleeping pills to drug me. He had planned to declare me incompetent. The violation of my home felt complete now. He had tainted the air in my house, but he had made one catastrophic miscalculation. He had assumed that because I moved slowly and spoke little, that I was weak. He had confused patience with senility. He had no idea that he was not the hunter in this scenario. He was the prey, and he had just walked into the kill zone. I looked at the clock, 1:15 in the morning. In less than 20 hours, Jamal would try to execute his plan. He would try to drug me. He would try to open my safe. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I began to visualize the hardware store aisles. I needed the glitter, yes. But after hearing him tonight, I knew I needed more than just a prank. I needed a marker that would brand him. I needed to make sure that when he walked out of my house in handcuffs, he would be wearing his guilt like a neon sign. Tomorrow I would wake up and be the confused old man one last time. I would shuffle and mumble and let him feel superior. I would let him pour his poisoned drink, and then I would show him exactly what a dinosaur is capable of. I woke at 6:30, the same as always, but today the routine felt like a performance. The recording on my phone under my pillow felt heavy, like a physical weight burning through the feathers. 12:47 in the morning, Jamal had sealed his fate. Now I had to let him walk into it. Downstairs, I started the coffee maker and began my usual breakfast ritual. Eggs over easy toast with strawberry jam orange juice. Everything precisely as it had been for the past 3 weeks, because predators notice when the prey changes its behavior. When Maya appeared in her scrubs, she looked exhausted. "Double shift today," she murmured, kissing my cheek. "I will not be home until tomorrow morning. Be good, you two." She looked at Jamal, who was sitting at the table reading news on his tablet with a calmness that made my stomach turn. He smiled at her, a warm, supportive smile that did not reach his eyes. "Do not worry, babe," he said. "Walter and I will hold down the fort. We will have a boys' night." I sipped my coffee, keeping my hands steady. A boys' night. That was his code for drugging me and robbing my safe. "Sounds fun," I lied, my voice raspy with morning stiffness. "I might turn in early, though. My joints are aching with this weather." Jamal's eyes flickered with satisfaction. "You rest up, Walter," he said. "No pressure." After Maya left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Jamal went into the living room to make more fake business calls, and I seized my window of opportunity. "I have some errands to run," I announced, grabbing my keys. "Just need to pick up some supplies for the garden." Jamal barely looked up. "Take your time, Walter," he called out. "Drive safe." He was probably thrilled to have the house to himself again, to do a final walkthrough of his crime scene. The drive to the hardware store was the first time I had felt like myself in weeks. I was not the frail old man anymore. I was the investigator. I was the man who had brought down Ponzi schemes and bank fraud rings. I parked the Buick and walked into the store with a purpose. I did not need a garden hose. I needed components for a containment trap. I walked the aisles with a shopping basket, gathering items that looked unrelated to anyone watching, but combined formed a nasty surprise. A canister of compressed air, a spring-loaded release mechanism usually used for cabinet doors, a small plastic funnel, and then the most important ingredient. I went to the paint aisle. I did not want regular paint. I picked up a bag of silver glitter, the finest grain they had, the kind that gets into your pores and never comes out. Then I found the marking chalk used for construction lines. Bright neon blue. It was a powder that stained skin on contact and required industrial solvents to remove. At the checkout, the clerk, a young man named Davis, scanned the items. "Building something interesting, Mr. Evans?" he asked. "Just a little project for the grandkids," I said, smiling, my innocent grandfather smile. "Something to surprise them." Davis chuckled. "They will love the glitter. Stuff gets everywhere, though. You have no idea," I said. Back home, I bypassed the kitchen and went straight down to my basement workshop. It was a dusty, cluttered space filled with tools from 40 years of home ownership. Jamal never came down here. It was too dirty for his Italian loafers. I locked the door from the inside and cleared a space on the workbench. It was time to engineer a masterpiece. I started with the delivery system. I took a small cardboard tube and reinforced it with duct tape. I mounted the spring mechanism at the bottom, calibrating the tension. It needed to be sensitive enough to trigger with a light touch, but stable enough not to go off when the drawer was simply opened. I tested it with a wooden spoon. Snap. The spring released with a satisfying thud, launching the spoon across the room. Perfect. Next came the payload. I mixed the silver glitter with the neon blue chalk powder in a plastic bowl. The ratio was important. Too much glitter and it would be heavy. Too much chalk and it would just make a cloud. I needed a blend that would explode, coat, and cling. I added a final ingredient from my old forensic kit, which I kept in a locked cabinet above the workbench, a small vial of synthetic DNA marker. It was a clear liquid that dried invisible but glowed bright amber under a UV light. It was unique to this specific vial. If Jamal tried to deny he was the one who opened the drawer, this marker would prove he was the only person in the world who could have done it. I loaded the mixture into the tube, packing it loosely to ensure maximum dispersion. I set the trigger. Now came the psychological component, the bait. I took the real brass key to the safe out of my pocket. I had retrieved it from the bedroom earlier while Jamal was in the shower. I traced its outline onto a piece of stiff cardboard, then cut it out. I glued 2 heavy washers to the cardboard to give it the correct weight, then painted it with a metallic brass spray paint I had on the shelf. In the dim light of a bedroom at night, it would look exactly like the key Jamal had seen yesterday. I attached a thin fishing line to the fake key and connected the other end to the trigger of my glitter cannon. The mechanics were simple. The cannon would sit in the back of the drawer hidden under the sweaters. The fake key would sit in the metal box on top of the sweaters. When Jamal reached in and lifted the key, the fishing line would pull the pin. The spring would release. The compressed air would fire, and Jamal would be painted blue, silver, and guilty. I packed the device into a shoebox and headed upstairs. The house was quiet. Jamal was likely in the guest room napping or refining his plan. I slipped into my bedroom and closed the door. My hands moved with practiced speed. I opened the bottom drawer of the highboy. I removed the sweaters, stacking them silently on the floor. I placed the cannon in the back corner, securing it with double-sided tape so it would not tip over. I replaced the sweaters carefully, creating a small tunnel through the wool for the payload to travel. I placed the metal box in its usual spot. I put the fake key inside, connecting the fishing line with surgical precision. I tested the tension one last time. It was taut. Ready. I closed the drawer, leaving it exactly as Jamal had found it yesterday. To the naked eye, it was just a dresser. To the informed eye, it was a loaded weapon. But I was not done. A trap captures the animal, but evidence captures the criminal. I pulled the wireless security camera I had bought days ago from my pocket. I needed a vantage point that covered the dresser and the door. I scanned the room. The bookshelf was too high. The nightstand was too low. My eyes landed on the smoke detector in the corner. It was old and yellowed. Perfect. I stood on a chair and mounted the tiny black camera just above the detector using its magnetic base. It blended perfectly with the shadows of the ceiling. I pulled out my phone and checked the feed. The wide-angle lens captured the entire room in crisp, high definition. I could see the bed, the dresser, and the doorway. I adjusted the settings, enabling motion activation and night vision. I stepped down from the chair and wiped my fingerprints off the smoke detector. I looked around the room. It was a stage set for a tragedy. Tonight, a man would walk into this room believing he was about to steal a future. Instead, he was going to lose his past, his present, and his dignity. I checked my watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. Maya was already at the hospital, starting her shift. Jamal would be waking up soon, getting ready to play the role of the devoted son-in-law one last time. I needed to be downstairs. I needed to be the old man. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked tired but hard. I had spent a lifetime using the law to fight bad men. Tonight I would use physics and psychology. I dried my face and practiced my tremor, my slight stoop. I opened the bedroom door and shuffled into the hallway. Downstairs I heard the television turn on. Jamal was watching sports, waiting for the clock to run down. I walked down the stairs, letting my feet drag slightly on the carpet. "Hey, Walter," Jamal called out from the living room, his voice too bright, too loud. "You get everything you needed for the garden?" I walked into the room and smiled at him. "Oh yes," I said. "I found exactly what I was looking for. Going to be a pest problem this year though. Just want to make sure I am prepared." Jamal laughed and it was a cold sound. "Yeah, well, you can never be too careful, right? You gotta protect what is yours." "Exactly," I said, sitting down in my armchair. "You have to protect what is yours." I closed my eyes and let my head loll back against the cushion, feigning a nap. But beneath my eyelids I was wide awake. The trap was set. The camera was rolling. Now all I had to do was wait for the mouse to take the cheese. Dinner passed in a blur of silence and the scraping of forks against porcelain. I moved the food around my plate, but I had no appetite. My stomach was a knot of tension, knowing that the man sitting across from me was counting down the minutes until my destruction. Jamal checked his phone every 5 minutes, his screen illuminating his anxious face in the dim dining room light. He was not eating either. He was pacing internally, waiting for the clock to strike the hour of his liberation. By 8 o'clock we had moved to the living room. Maya was long gone, safe at the hospital, unaware that her home had become a battlefield. I sat in my usual leather armchair, feigning interest in a history documentary on the television. Jamal stood by the window, peering out into the dark street. He was looking for the repo man, or perhaps his loan shark, or maybe just reassuring himself that the world outside was still there. He turned to me suddenly, a forced brightness in his voice. "You know, Walter, I have been thinking. We never really get a chance to just talk man to man. With Maya working so hard and me being busy with the startup, we are like ships passing in the night." I looked up from the television, keeping my expression mild. "That is true, Jamal," I said. "Life gets busy." He walked over to the liquor cabinet, his movements casual but practiced. "I saw this bottle of Macallan, 18 inches the back. That is some serious scotch, Walter. It is a shame to let it just gather dust. What do you say we have a glass? A nightcap to celebrate the future." I watched him reach for the bottle. He had been planning this moment since breakfast. The bonding attempt, the drink, the delivery method for the sedation he had promised his partner on the phone. "I appreciate the offer, Jamal," I said slowly. "But you know I take blood pressure medication in the evenings. My doctor was very strict about mixing it with alcohol." Jamal paused, his hand hovering over the bottle. He turned to me, his smile tightening at the edges. "Come on, Walter, just one splash. A toast. It won't kill you. It is top-shelf stuff. You deserve to relax a little." His persistence was the tell. A normal person would have accepted the refusal. A desperate man needed me unconscious. "I suppose one small glass would not hurt," I said, allowing a note of hesitation in my voice. "Just a finger, though." "Great," Jamal said too loudly. "You stay there. I will pour it for us." He grabbed 2 tumblers and carried them into the kitchen, out of my line of sight. I sat perfectly still, straining my ears. I heard the clink of glass, then a faint grinding sound like a pestle in a mortar, or perhaps a spoon crushing something against the counter. Then the sound of liquid pouring. He was not even trying to be subtle, assumed my hearing was as gone as my wits. He returned a minute later, carrying the 2 glasses. He held the one in his left hand out to me. "Here you go, Walter. To family." I took the glass. The amber liquid swirled innocently, catching the light from the television. I raised it to my nose, pretending to savor the bouquet. Beneath the peat and oak of the expensive scotch there was a faint, chalky undertone, acrid, bitter. The binders used in pharmaceutical tablets. He had crushed up enough sleeping pills to knock out a horse. "To family," I echoed. I raised the glass to my lips. Jamal watched me, his eyes locked on my throat, waiting for the swallow. He looked hungry. Just as the liquid touched my lips, I frowned and looked toward the front window. "What was that?" I asked sharply. "Is someone in the driveway?" Jamal spun around, panic flaring in his eyes. "What? Where?" In the split second his back was turned, I poured the contents of my glass into the large potted fern standing beside my chair. The soil drank the whiskey and the drugs instantly. I brought the empty glass back to my lips and made a loud swallowing sound, followed by a satisfied exhale. Jamal turned back, searching the dark driveway through the window. "I do not see anything, Walter." "Must have been a stray dog," I said, wiping my mouth. "Smooth. That is good stuff." Jamal looked at my empty glass and his shoulders dropped 3 inches. Relief washed over him. He took a sip of his own undrugged scotch and smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Nothing like it." We sat in silence for 20 minutes. I let my eyelids droop. I let my head nod forward, then snap back up as if I were fighting sleep. I slurred my words slightly when I spoke. Boy, I mumbled, rubbing my face. That scotch really hit me fast. Must be the pills. Jamal leaned forward, watching the performance with clinical interest. You look beat, Walter. Why do you not go on up to bed? Catch up on some sleep. Yeah, I said, struggling to stand up. I think I will. I feel very heavy. I stumbled slightly as I rose, gripping the arm of the chair for support. Jamal made a move to help me, then stopped. He wanted me weak, but he did not want to touch me. He watched me shamble toward the stairs. Good night, Jamal, I called out, my voice thick. Lock up tight. I will, Walter, he said. Sleep tight. I climbed the stairs one heavy step at a time until I reached the landing. Then I dropped the act. I moved quickly and silently into my bedroom, closing the door but leaving it unlatched just a fraction of an inch. I needed to be able to see the hallway light. I did not get into bed. Not yet. I checked the trap in the dresser one last time. The fishing line was taut. The cannon was primed. The fake key sat on its velvet throne, waiting for a king to come claim it. I turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I sat in the high-backed chair in the corner of the room, partially obscured by the shadows of the wardrobe. I had a clear view of the door and the dresser. I checked my phone. The camera feed was live, glowing faintly in my hand. The night vision turned the room into a ghostly green landscape. Downstairs I heard Jamal moving around. He was emboldened now. He turned up the volume on the television. He opened the refrigerator. He was celebrating. He thought the old man was comatose upstairs, deep in a chemical slumber that would last 12 hours. I waited. 9 o'clock passed. Then 10. At 10:30 the television turned off. The house went silent. Then came the footsteps. He was coming up. Not to rob me yet. He was coming to verify. He needed to be sure the drugs had worked. He needed to see the body. I quickly moved from the chair to the bed. I lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, but pulled the duvet up to my chin. I turned my head to the side, opened my mouth slightly, and began to snore, a slow, rhythmic rattle that sounded like deep geriatric sleep. The door creaked open. I saw the beam of a flashlight cut across the room. It played over the dresser, then moved to the bed. The light hit my face. I did not flinch. I kept my breathing steady, deep and heavy. Walter, Jamal whispered. I let out a snort and rolled over, facing the wall, pulling the covers tighter. Jamal chuckled softly. Out cold, he murmured. He stood there for another minute, enjoying his power. He was the master of the house now, the puppet master. He had drugged the father, fooled the daughter, and was hours away from stealing the fortune. See you at midnight, old man, he whispered. He backed out of the room, pulling the door until it was almost closed again. I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall into the guest room. I opened my eyes in the darkness. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was ice cold. He was going to wait until midnight. That gave me an hour and a half. I sat up slowly. I needed to be ready. I needed to be in position. When that glitter bomb went off, I wanted to be the first thing he saw when he cleared his eyes. I wanted to be the nightmare that woke him up. I checked the camera feed again. The green image of my room was serene and quiet, but in the corner of the screen the dresser loomed like a monolith. I settled back into the chair in the shadows. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. Come on, Jamal, I thought. Come and get your inheritance. Come and see what happens when you underestimate a dinosaur. The house settled into silence again, but it was a heavy silence. The kind that comes before a storm. The kind that comes before the trap snaps shut. At 2:43 in the morning, the first board creaked in the hallway. I had been sitting in the velvet armchair in the corner of my bedroom for nearly 4 hours, staring into the darkness like a gargoyle. My legs were stiff and my eyes burned from the strain of watching the shadows, but my mind was razor sharp. The house was silent, settled deep into the night, but the sound of weight shifting on the oak floorboards outside my door was unmistakable. It was not the wind. It was not the house settling. It was a predator coming to feed. I checked the phone in my lap one last time. The camera feed showed the room in ghostly green night vision. The dresser stood tall and imposing against the far wall, a wooden soldier guarding a loaded mine. The drawer was shut, the trap was primed, and the bait was waiting. I slipped the phone into my pocket and gripped the arms of the chair. My breathing was shallow, silent, controlled. The door handle turned with agonizing slowness. Jamal was being careful. He believed I was drugged into a coma, but he was a coward at heart, and cowards take no chances. The latch clicked soft as a whisper and the door pushed inward. A slice of hallway light cut across the carpet, widening until it revealed a silhouette standing in the frame. Jamal was dressed in black like a cat burglar from a bad movie. He wore gloves, tight leather ones that would leave no prints but would offer no protection against what was coming. He stood frozen in the doorway for a full minute listening. He was waiting for the rhythm of my breathing, waiting for any sign of consciousness. From my position in the deep shadows of the corner, I was invisible. To him, the room was just a dark cavern containing a sleeping old man and a fortune in assets. Satisfied that the drugs had done their work, he stepped inside. He moved with a confidence that made my blood boil. There was no hesitation now. He walked past the bed where I had arranged pillows under the duvet to mimic a sleeping form. He did not even glance at it. His eyes were locked on the prize. He approached the highboy dresser, his movements fluid and practiced. He had rehearsed this in his mind 1,000 times. Walk in, open drawer, take key, open safe, take money, leave. It was supposed to be the easiest $47,000 he ever made. I watched him reach the dresser. He paused, adjusting his gloves. He looked like a surgeon about to perform an operation. He reached out and grasped the handles of the bottom drawer. Do it, I thought, my heart hammering against my ribs. Open it, he pulled. The drawer slid out on its well-oiled tracks, silent and smooth. Jamal leaned over, peering into the depths. He reached in, moving the stack of wool sweaters aside just as he had done yesterday. He found the metal box. He opened the lid. I could see the outline of his back tense with triumph. He saw it. The brass key sitting there on its velvet bed, glinting in the faint light from the hall. The solution to all his problems. The ticket to his freedom. He reached in. His fingers closed around the bow of the fake key. He pulled. The sound was not an explosion, it was a violent, percussive thwomp like a high-pressure airbag deploying in a closet. The silence of the night was shattered instantly. The compressed air canister released its entire payload in a fraction of a second, channeling the blast through the tube I had engineered. A cloud of neon blue dust and silver glitter erupted from the drawer with the force of a geyser. It hit Jamal squarely in the chest and face, expanding outward in a shimmering toxic cloud that filled the room. Jamal screamed. It was a high-pitched sound of pure, primal terror. He stumbled backward, blinded and choking, his hands clawing at his face. He tripped over his own feet and crashed into the nightstand, sending the lamp and my reading glasses clattering to the floor. The cloud of blue dust hung in the air, swirling in the turbulence of his panic. I stood up from the chair and reached for the wall switch. I flicked the lights on. The scene before me was a masterpiece of forensic justice. Jamal lay on the floor, coughing and sputtering. He looked like he had been dipped in a vat of industrial paint. His face was coated in a thick layer of neon blue powder. His black clothes were plastered with silver glitter that sparkled aggressively under the overhead lights. The dye had already begun to react with the moisture in his skin, turning from powder to a deep, indelible stain that would mark him for days. He scrambled backward on the carpet, his eyes wild and streaming tears through the blue mask of his face. He looked up and saw me standing there, fully dressed, alert, and watching him with cold satisfaction. "Walter," he gasped, coughing up a cloud of blue dust. "Hello, Jamal," I said, my voice steady and calm. He looked around the room, frantically trying to process the shift in reality. The drug had not worked. The key was a trap. The old man was not asleep. "What?" he stammered, wiping at his eyes, only smearing the dye deeper into his skin. "What happened? What is this?" "It is a containment marker," I said, stepping closer to him. "It is used to identify thieves who touch things that do not belong to them. It is very hard to wash off, Jamal. I hope you do not have any important meetings this week." He stared at me, his blue face twisting into a mix of fear and confusion. Then the survival instinct kicked in. The lie. "I heard a noise," he blurted out, scrambling to his feet. "I heard a noise in your room, Walter. I thought someone was breaking in. I came to check on you and saw the drawer open and—" "Stop," I said. The single word cracked like a whip in the small room. "Do not insult my intelligence, Jamal," I continued, keeping my voice low. "You did not hear a noise. You waited until 2:45 in the morning because you thought the sleeping pills you put in my scotch had finally kicked in. You came in here to take the key to the floor safe so you could steal $47,000 to pay off your gambling debts." His mouth opened and closed. The blue powder around his lips cracked with the movement. "How?" he whispered. "How do you know about that?" "I know about the debt," I said, ticking the points off on my fingers. "I know about Tone. I know about the plan to gaslight Maya and declare me senile. I know you pawned her grandmother's jewelry last month. I know everything, Jamal, because I am not a senile old dinosaur. I am a forensic investigator and you have been under surveillance for 3 days. Surveillance, he repeated, looking around the room wildly. I pointed to the smoke detector in the corner. The tiny camera lens was barely visible, but Jamal saw it. He realized that every second of his humiliation had been recorded in high definition. The entry, the theft attempt, the explosion, the lie. He slumped against the wall, the glitter cascading from his shoulders like dandruff. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a pathetic blue man in a ruined suit. "Walter, please," he said, his voice breaking. "You have to understand. I was desperate. They were going to hurt me. They threatened the house. I was trying to fix it. By robbing me?" I asked. "By betraying the woman who loves you. By drugging her father. That is how you fix things." "I was going to pay it back," he pleaded. "Once the business took off." "There is no business, Jamal." I cut him off. "There never was. Just bets and losses and lies." I checked my watch. 3:05. "We have company coming," I said. Jamal looked up, panic flaring again in his blue-rimmed eyes. "Who?" "The police." "Not yet," I said. "I sent a text message to Maya about an hour ago. I told her I was having chest pains and she needed to come home immediately. She should be pulling into the driveway right about now." "No," Jamal gasped. "Walter, no. Please do not let her see me like this." He looked down at himself. He was a walking piece of evidence. There was no hiding it. He could not wash it off. He could not explain it away. He was literally wearing his crime. I walked over to the window and looked down. Headlights swept across the front lawn. Maya's car turned into the driveway, moving fast. She was terrified, thinking her father was dying. She was rushing home to save her family. "She is going to walk through that door in about 2 minutes, Jamal," I said, turning back to him. "And when she does, she is going to see you for exactly what you are. Not a businessman, not a husband, just a thief covered in glitter." Jamal sank to the floor, putting his blue head in his blue hands. He began to sob. It was a wet, pathetic sound. I stood over him, feeling no pity, only a cold sense of closure. The trap had worked perfectly. The prey was captured. The evidence was secured. Now came the hardest part, breaking my daughter's heart to save her life. I heard the front door burst open downstairs. "Dad!" Maya screamed, her voice full of panic. "Dad, where are you?" "Up here, honey," I called out, my voice strong and clear. "We are in the bedroom." Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Jamal curled into a ball, trying to make himself small, trying to disappear. But the glitter caught the light shining brightly, a beacon of his guilt that no shadow could hide. Maya stopped dead in the doorway, her chest heaving from the sprint up the stairs. She was wearing her hospital scrubs, her ID badge still clipped to her chest, swinging like a pendulum. She looked from me standing calmly by the window to her husband curled on the floor in a fetal position of shimmering blue misery. The scene was so absurd, so violently colorful against the beige neutrality of the bedroom, that her brain simply refused to process it for a moment. "Dad," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You said chest pains. I thought you were dying." "I am fine, sweetheart," I said softly. "My heart is strong. I just needed you to come home because we have a different kind of emergency." Maya's eyes dragged themselves back to the floor. Jamal slowly uncurled himself, realizing that hiding was impossible. He sat up, his face a mask of neon blue dye, his eyelashes caked with silver glitter. He looked like a nightmare clown. When he saw Maya looking at him, he reached out a hand. "Baby," he croaked. "Baby, listen to me." Maya took a sharp step back, hitting the doorframe. "Jamal," she whispered, "what happened to you? Why are you blue? Why is Dad looking at you like that?" Jamal scrambled to his feet, wiping his hands on his ruined pants, but the glitter just spread, transferring from fabric to skin in a viral shimmer. "It was a misunderstanding," Jamal said, his voice rising in pitch. "A terrible misunderstanding. I heard a noise in here, Maya. I thought someone was breaking in to hurt Walter. I came in to protect him and this trap went off. He put a bomb in his dresser, Maya. A literal bomb." He pointed an accusing blue finger at me. "He is crazy, Maya," Jamal continued, gaining momentum. "Look at this. Who does this? He is losing his mind. He nearly blinded me." Maya looked at me, her eyes wide and confused. "Dad," she asked, "did you put a trap in your dresser?" "I did," I said calmly. "Because I knew exactly who was coming to open it." Jamal shouted over me, desperate to control the narrative. "See, he admits it. He is paranoid, Maya. He is dangerous. We need to get him help. We need to get out of here." He took a step toward her, reaching for her arm. Maya flinched, pulling away as if he were radioactive. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "You are covered in whatever that is." Jamal froze, his hand hovering in the air. The blue dye on his palms looked like blood in the strange lighting. Jamal looked at his wife, and for the first time I saw the arrogance completely vanish, leaving only raw panic. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet choking sound. 47,000. Jamal repeated, shaking his head violently, sending a fresh shower of glitter onto the carpet. "That is insane, Maya. He is making up numbers. He is confused. I told you he is losing it." He turned toward me, his blue hands clenched into fists. "You are sick, Walter. Making up lies to ruin my marriage because you are lonely and jealous. You need a doctor." Maya looked at me, her face pale and conflicted. She wanted to believe him. I could see it in her eyes. No child wants to believe their spouse is a monster, and no child wants to believe their parent is crazy. She was trapped between two impossible realities. "Dad," she said slowly, "that is a very specific amount. Why would you say that?" "Because that is exactly what he owes to a loan shark named Tone," I said, keeping my voice level. "And that is exactly why he is standing here covered in forensic dye instead of sleeping in the guest room." Jamal lunged toward Maya, grabbing her shoulders with his stained hands. "Baby, look at me. It is me, Jamal, your husband. Would I ever hurt you? Would I ever steal from your family? He is senile, Maya. He put a bomb in his dresser. He is dangerous. We need to leave. Right now. Grab your purse." Maya looked down at his blue hands, gripping her white nursing scrubs. The dye was transferring, leaving handprints on her chest like a violent brand. She looked at his eyes, searching for the man she married. "I am not going anywhere, Jamal," she said, pulling away from him. "Not until I get the truth. The truth is, he is crazy," Jamal screamed, his voice cracking. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the dim light. "I expected you to lie, Jamal," I said. "That is why I did not just trust my memory. I trusted technology." I held the phone up. "Maya," I said, "I recorded this last night, through the floor vent. I think you need to listen to what your husband does when he thinks we are all asleep." "No," Jamal shouted, lunging for the phone. "Give me that." I stepped back and Maya stepped in between us, shoving Jamal back with a strength that surprised us both. "Let him play it," she snapped. "But Maya, it is probably deepfake or something," Jamal pleaded. "You know technology. He doctored it." "Shut up, Jamal," she hissed. "Just shut up." She turned to me and nodded. "Play it, Dad." I pressed the button. The room filled with the sound of static, then Jamal's voice, clear and undeniable. "The old man is completely checked out. I tested him today with the key and he did not even notice. He is soft, Tone, a total dinosaur." Maya flinched as if she had been slapped. She stared at the phone, her mouth slightly open. Jamal stood frozen against the wall, his blue face glistening with sweat. "We are talking serious money here," the recording continued. "He keeps at least 50 grand in cash in that floor safe. It covers the debt and leaves us with a nice cushion." Maya's hands flew to her mouth. She looked at Jamal, horror dawning in her eyes. The recording played on, merciless. "What about the wife?" the accomplice asked. "Do not worry about Maya," Jamal's recorded voice sneered. "She is working the night shift. She is clueless. I will tell her he must have moved the money and forgot. You know how old people get. I can convince her he is losing his mind. She trusts me." I watched my daughter break. It was not a loud break. It was a silent crumbling. She wrapped her arms around herself as if she were cold. She heard the man she loved call her clueless. She heard him plotting to use her trust as a weapon against her father. "I will dose the old man's drink around 8, the recording continued. "I ground up some of his sleeping pills. He will be out cold." Maya gasped. She looked at the empty whiskey glass still sitting on the nightstand, then at me. "You drugged him," she whispered. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise of the explosion had been. "It is out of context," Jamal stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I was just talking big. I was not really going to do it. It was just a joke, Maya. A bad joke." "A joke," Maya repeated. Her voice was flat dead. "You called me clueless. You planned to drug my father. You were going to steal his life savings and then convince me he was crazy." "Maya, please." Jamal stepped forward, reaching for her again. "Don't," she screamed. The sound tore through the house. She looked at him with a revulsion so pure it must have burned. "I defended you," she said, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. When Dad said you were flashy, I defended you. When the money got tight, I picked up extra shifts. I worked double shifts, Jamal, while you were sitting in my father's garden planning to rob him. She looked down at the blue handprints on her white scrubs. You made me doubt him, she whispered. You made me think he was getting old. You made me worry about his mind, and all the while you were the one who was sick. Jamal looked at me, his eyes filled with hatred. You ruined everything, he spat. You miserable old man. You tricked me. I did not trick you, Jamal, I said calmly. I just let you be yourself. Maya wiped her face, smearing a streak of blue dye across her cheek where Jamal had touched her. She straightened her spine. The nurse who handled trauma cases, the woman who held things together, finally took the wheel. Get out, she said. Jamal blinked. What? Get out of this house, Maya said, her voice rising. Get your things and get out. You cannot kick me out. Jamal sneered, trying to regain some ground. This is marital property. I have rights. You have nothing, I interjected, stepping forward. You are in my house, Jamal. My name is on the deed. My name is on the trust. You are a guest who just attempted a felony. Jamal looked between us. He saw the united front, the father and the daughter, the dinosaur and the nurse. Fine, he spat. I will leave, but I am taking the car. The car, Maya laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. The car that got repossessed yesterday morning. Jamal froze. I saw the tow truck, Jamal, Maya said. I saw you give them the key. You lied about that too. You lied about everything. Jamal looked at the door, then back at us. He realized there was no pivot left. No lie big enough to cover the glitter. He was exposed, naked in his greed. I will be back with a lawyer, he threatened, pointing a blue finger at me. You assaulted me with a chemical weapon. I will sue you for everything you have. I will be waiting, I said, and so will the police report I am going to file in the morning. Attempted burglary, elder abuse, conspiracy. Jamal sneered one last time, then turned and stormed out of the room. We heard him stomping down the hall toward the guest room. We heard the violent zipping of a suitcase. We heard things being thrown. Maya did not move. She stood in the center of the room, trembling. I walked over to her and wrapped my arms around her. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing. I am so sorry, Dad, she cried. I am so sorry. I brought him here. I did this. Shh, I soothed, rubbing her back. You did nothing wrong, sweetheart. You loved someone. That is not a crime. He is the criminal. We stood there for 10 minutes listening to the sounds of Jamal packing his life away. Then we heard the heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs. The front door slammed with a force that shook the window panes. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. I watched Jamal drag his suitcase down the driveway. He looked small and pathetic, shimmering in the moonlight under the street lamp. He had arrived in a luxury car, acting like a king. He was leaving on foot, covered in glitter, looking like a fool. He walked down the street and disappeared into the shadows. I turned back to Maya. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding the fake key I had made. She turned it over in her hands, looking at the brass paint and the washers. You made this? She asked, a small, sad smile touching her lips. I did, I said. Arts and crafts. She looked up at me and her eyes were clear. He said you were a dinosaur. I smiled. Even dinosaurs have teeth, honey. She laughed, a wet, broken sound, but it was real. Come on, I said, holding out my hand. Let us go downstairs. I think we both need a real drink. And then we are going to call the locksmith. We had barely made it to the kitchen when the pounding started. It was a heavy, desperate rhythm against the front door, shaking the stained glass panels I had restored 10 years ago. Maya froze, her hand hovering over the kettle. He came back. She whispered, her eyes wide with a renewed fear. He did not leave. I walked past her, moving with a steady calmness that I did not entirely feel. He did not leave because he has nowhere to go, I said. He has no car, no money, and a debt that is going to get him killed. He is cornered, Maya. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Jamal stood on the porch, shivering in the night air. The neon blue dye on his face had darkened to a bruised purple under the porch light, and the glitter still clung to him like a disease. He looked manic. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss and decided to jump. You cannot just throw me out, he shouted, pushing his way into the foyer before I could stop him. I know my rights, Walter. I have been texting my lawyer. This is the marital home. I have established residency. If you want me gone, you have to buy me out. Maya stepped into the hallway, her arms crossed over her chest, protecting herself from him. "Buy you out," she repeated incredulously. "You tried to rob us, Jamal. You are covered in evidence. I do not care." Jamal spat his blue spittle, landing on the hardwood floor. "Unless you want me to drag this out in court for 2 years. Unless you want me to make your life a living hell with hearings and motions, you are going to write me a check right now. I want my share of the equity. This house is worth at least $800,000. My half is $400. He was bluffing, but it was a dangerous bluff. He was trying to turn his crime into a negotiation. He needed that money for Tone. He needed it to save his legs, and he did not care if he had to burn my house down to get it. I laughed. It was a dry sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged hallway. Jamal stopped his rant mid-sentence, startled by the noise. "What is so funny, old man?" he sneered. "You are," I said, leaning against the newel post. "You call me a dinosaur, Jamal, but you forgot that dinosaurs have been around a long time. They know the terrain. You did not do your due diligence." "What are you talking about?" he asked, his eyes darting between me and Maya. "You think you have a claim to this house," I said. "You think because you married my daughter and slept in my guest room that you earned equity. But you never checked the title, did you? You never went down to the county clerk's office." Jamal's confidence wavered. The blue dye on his forehead wrinkled as he frowned. "If you had," I continued, keeping my voice conversational, "you would have seen that this house does not belong to me. It does not belong to Maya either. Since 1998, this property and all my major assets have been held in an irrevocable trust." I watched the words sink in. Irrevocable. "The beneficiary is Maya," I said. "But she has no control over the principal until I die, and I am the sole trustee. You cannot sue for it. You cannot claim it in a divorce. You cannot touch a single brick of this house, Jamal. You own nothing." The air went out of him. He slumped against the wall, leaving a smudge of glittery blue on the wallpaper. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was no payday. There was no settlement. There was only the debt and the sharks waiting for him in the dark. "You tricked me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You knew. You let me think." "I let you think whatever you wanted," I said. "I protected my family from parasites. That is what fathers do." Jamal looked at Maya, pleading one last time. "Maya, please. You cannot let him do this. I will be killed. They will kill me." Maya looked at him, and her face was stone. "Then you should not have gambled money you did not have," she said. Jamal let out a roar of frustration and lunged toward me, his hands reaching for my throat. I braced myself, ready to fight, but before he could reach me, the room was flooded with flashing red and blue lights from the driveway. Sirens cut through the night, sharp and loud. Jamal froze his hands in mid-air. I checked my watch. 3:15. Right on time. "You called the cops," Jamal gasped, backing away. "I called them 4 hours ago," I said. "Right after I recorded your phone call. I told them there was a man threatening to harm my daughter and rob my home. I told them about the outstanding warrants for fraud you have in Nevada. You did not think I would check your background again, did you?" The front door, which was still ajar, was pushed open. Officer Williams, a man I had known for 20 years, stepped inside, his hand resting on his holster. 2 other officers stood behind him. "Walter," Officer Williams said, nodding to me. "Is everything okay here?" "It is now," I said, pointing to the blue figure trembling against the wall. "That is him, Jamal Evans, or as he is known in Las Vegas, Marcus Thorne." Jamal put his hands up, shielding his face from the flashlights. "It was a misunderstanding," he sobbed. Officer Williams stepped forward, looking Jamal up and down. "Son," he drawled, "you look like you lost a fight with a craft store. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Jamal did not fight. He had no fight left. He turned around slowly, and Officer Williams clicked the handcuffs onto his blue-stained wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," Williams recited. Jamal looked back at us over his shoulder as they dragged him out. His eyes were hollow, empty. He looked at Maya one last time, but she turned her face away, unable to watch the man she had loved be hauled out like garbage. We watched from the doorway as they put him in the back of the cruiser. The blue dye on his face reflected the police lights, creating a grotesque mask of tragedy. He was still crying when they shut the door. Officer Williams walked back up the steps. "We will need a statement in the morning, Walter," he said. "We found a burner phone in his pocket. Texts confirm the conspiracy with the third party. You saved us a lot of legwork with that recording." "Thank you, Williams," I said, shaking his hand. "Keep him away from the general population if you can. He owes money to bad people. I will see what I can do." Williams said. Get some rest, Walter. You too, Maya. The cruisers pulled away, their lights fading into the distance. The street returned to silence. The only evidence that Jamal had ever been there was the trail of glitter on the porch and the blue smudge on my hallway wallpaper. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt, sliding the chain into place. I turned to Maya. She was leaning against the wall, tears streaming down her face again, but her shoulders were relaxed. The tension that had gripped our house for 3 weeks was finally gone. Is it over? She asked softly. It is over, I said. He cannot hurt us anymore. She walked into my arms and I held her tight. I looked around the hallway. It was messy. It was stained. But it was ours again. The predator was gone. The dinosaur had won. Come on, I said, gently guiding her toward the kitchen. Let us have that tea. And then tomorrow we are going to scrub this house from top to bottom. We are going to wash away every speck of glitter and every bad memory. In a culture that worships youth and speed, we often make the fatal mistake of equating silence with ignorance. We forget that the oldest trees have the deepest roots, capable of weathering storms that would snap a sapling in half. True power is rarely loud. It is patient, observant, and calculated. When someone dismisses you or underestimates your value, do not rush to correct them. Their arrogance is your greatest tactical advantage. Let them believe they are the hunter, right up until the moment the trap snaps shut. Wisdom is not just about knowing the past, it is about outsmarting the future. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served cold.